What is the nicest illegal thing someone has done for you? Was making a frozen cake for my niece and needed an Elsa topper. They had the perfect size, but it came with this entire set I didn't want or need. It sucked. The Elsa was so perfect for the cake. I approached the most jaded looking teen employee ever and asked if there was any way she knew of an Elsa the same size but not part of the set. She stared at me, mouth agape, and simply broke off the Elsa part I needed and handed that to me. A bit flustered, I thanked her and asked how I should ask checkout to price it. She sullenly was like, I wouldn't, you got a pocket? And that's how a teenager got me to commit petty theft. But I like to think we did it together. Cake looked great. Sounds like retail. We don't give a frick. It's not like we're going to get a raise anytime soon, so who cares? Unless you're a dong about it. We don't really care. Plus there's nothing we can do anyway. That is, say hey, don't steal that. I'm not sure if it's illegal, but when I lived in Belgium my income was about 5,000 euros short of what I needed to sponsor my husband for a family visa. My father wrote me up a contract that said I was doing web work for him. Lies. Which covered the missing income. I never actually got the money, I just needed it to submit for the visa application. I have hyperhidrosis, which means I can be swimming in sweat no matter the weather, to the point where drops of sweat dripping from my armpits is a normal occurrence. I had hit a rough patch and was a sneeze away from being homeless. I use a special deodorant that helps a lot with the problem, but its cost is a little prohibitive. My sister and her husband took me in while I got back on my feet, and since I already had a job they knew it was temporary. I had already signed the contract, but it didn't start until about 1 month later. My sister's husband noticed my problem, took me aside and asked me about it, then told me not to worry about it. I was showering a couple of times a day so I wouldn't have to use deodorant. To try and save some, he went to the local supermarket and got me like 7 of them. They were quite broke too, so I freaked out about the money. They needed food too. He just smiled and said 5-finger discount. Don't worry about it. That guy is awesome. Pretty positive my dad stole a candy bar he said I couldn't have at the checkout of the grocery store and gave it to me in the parking lot. I sure as crap didn't see him pay for it. I'm a foreigner so my English ist not perfect. Our local cinema closed, so my cousin bought about 20-ish seats from it and built a small cinema in his basement. He would get pirated copies of pretty much every new cool film and invited everybody in the village to come watch them. The price you needed to pay was to bring something small to eat for everybody else. Literally had the same setup back in my old village. Free movie if you bring some sweets or a share bottle of drink. Share a Google Drive link with every episode of both seasons of Avatar and all the comics with me. Unfortunately it got removed, but not before I saved it all onto my hard drive. Allowed me to buy adhesive even though it was age restricted. I guess my state has an issue with people huffing glue, so all industrial strength adhesives are 21 or older to buy. Dad and I were working on restoring a weather seal on our plane, so he sent 16-year-old me to the auto shop to buy it. Found the glue and got to the register. Manager looks at me, asked if I was planning on huffing it. Of course said no, and he just kinda shrugged and sold it to me. Waved me through customs when I was technically over the limit on duty-free alcohol. It wasn't so much a kind gesture of empathy as a thoroughly annoyed what the heck did you come through my line to declare an extra $15 of booze for brusque waving off. I've had this happen for me, except it wasn't $15 of extra booze. We're talking like $600 of extra booze in an extra suitcase, and they waved me through even after I declared it on the customs form and was ready with receipts and everything. I suspect this happens more often than not. I got free Molly at my cousin's wedding. Girl sat me down, explained it all since it was my first time and explained the ins and outs. Gave me a few websites to consider and had me promise her I'd be safe. Never met a nicer drug dealer. I was expecting some drug stories. That's cool that you got to do it your first time at a wedding. That's a pretty good environment for a first role. Everyone being close as family, and good music and dancing. I was having a crappy night. Told someone about it who had just taken Ambien to get high. He drove high to my house to try and comfort me. I was so freaking angry. Like, thanks for caring about me, but you can't even walk upright or talk coherently. What the frick makes you think you can drive? Youth resource officer misplaced a report on me after I got into a fist fight with my bully and managed to break the kid's thumb. He confided that he knew exactly where the report was, but he was just as sick of the bully as I was. A complete stranger saw me crying in a park one day, walked over, handed me a joint, said feel better, and walked away. All that was sweet of them. Don't think it's illegal, but shout out to all the drivers who flash their high beams when a cop is ahead. LOL, a couple months ago I passed by a cop lurking in a parking lot, so I flashed my brights at the next car I saw about a quarter mile down the road. As I got close to the car I realized it was also a cop. When I was 15 someone stole my wrestling shoes and I was really disappointed because wrestling was the whole reason I even graduated and stayed in school. So my dad went to Dong's Sporting Goods and stole the nicest pair he could find for me. My girlfriend and I decided to go to this nice restaurant for a date and then go see this film my brother was debuting that I wrote music for. The restaurant took forever to get us our food, and by the time they did we just asked for them to bring us boxes because we were running super late thanks to them. I just spent like $50 on food and was so pissed I'd have to eat it as crappy leftovers. We got to my car and I was complaining to my girlfriend that I was so hungry and now we had no way to eat it and all that, and she pulls out a fork. She stole a fork from the restaurant so I could eat my food in the car. We're both super moral people and always talk about going back to the restaurant and leaving the fork we took on the table when we leave. So that way was just borrowing it for a few years. My grandma would always pack up one of the dishes that hold sides in this one restaurant if she got box. She passed a little over 2 years ago now and we still have almost a dozen of those side dishes in the cupboard. Got my friend out of jail. Not technically illegal I suppose, but a judge I had endeared myself to pulled strings to get my friend out of jail over a traffic ticket he couldn't pay. It was at least an abuse of power. That's a BS reason for anyone to be in jail, though I've had bench warrants out over fixed tickets. A friend of mine stole a flamingo out of a stranger's yard simply because I said I wanted one. Best gift I've ever received. I bought a new one and replaced it BTW. Not sure if illegal, but definitely not safe. I was running late to an important event and I was trying to follow Google Maps, but the area I was in was super confusing and I wound up getting in the wrong lane at a red light. Turning left rather than going straight would have taken me onto an interstate. The guy in the car next to me somehow saw my distress and made motions asking if I needed to go straight. When I nodded, he motioned for me to go in front of him when the light turned green. I gave him a smile and a thumbs up and he returned it. Because of him, I wound up actually arriving on time. Thanks, blue Subaru guy, you're a real bro. My workplace is by a very busy wide street, about 5 or 6 lanes, and the cross paths are 0.5 mile apart. The bus stop is exactly at the middle of the streets, and my workplace is right across the street. So to avoid unnecessary walking, I estimate how fast the cars are going, and I always find a way to jaywalk and run across the street. This particular morning, I didn't plan the traffic speed very well. I cross a few lanes, and then I was in the middle of the street, cars going by behind and in front of me. I see a police car in the traffic in front of me. I said to myself, oh crap, I heard you could get a fine by jaywalking, but I didn't know it was a real thing. The police car's lights turns on. I thought he wanted me to pull me over by foot. It took me a second to understand that he was indicating the other cars to stop for me so I can walk across. I never jaywalked on that street after that day. Condense your illegal output to a single action and get some white paint and a large rectangular cutout. At 0200 0300 one night make your own crosswalk. Lots of illegal all at once to avoid multiple small illegals. It wasn't illegal but super against the rules. I have problems with my feet and in high school I couldn't run a 10-minute mile. It was pass fail, and it was a stupid amount of our grade. We had our partner count laps for us, and my partner lied and said I had hit my final lap right before the 10-minute mark, when I was actually 1 lap short. When I was younger, around the time Vice City came out, I was 12 or so, a random kid online mailed me a burned copy of the install disc, play disc, and even a disc of his favorite mods for GTA Vice City on PC. That was so cool. I hadn't thought about that in years. I don't even remember what site I met him through or anything. I used to frequent MSN groups, so it may have been through that. He was some random kid to you, but you were obviously his best friend. A very friendly fellow from my drawing class in college once took me out to a farm in the countryside, fed me some magic aspirins and taught me that I didn't hate dance music, just the crap that was passing for it on the radio. Thank you, sir. You saved my life. A lawyer told me how it was perfectly legal to use someone's private emails in court as proof if we lived under the same roof and the emails were taken from the shared family computer and not from her email. Wink. In other words, hack her email, copy the emails to the computer, change the file creation dates and expose your mother and her lover for trying to incriminate your dad for crimes she committed. In the country I grew up, the local version of CPS would give lawyers to underage children for free, with legal counseling and many other ways to get legal help. I won't get into more details, but I will just say that justice was served and my dad didn't spend a single day in jail. Dang, that sounds like a wild ride. Sorry you had to go through all that. I hope you're living a good life. Thank you Peace Corps volunteers in Sierra Leone who had several seasons worth of Simpsons and Futurama burned onto their hard drives to pass on to my training group. I wish we could return the favor, had it not been for the Ebola outbreak of 2014. Short, yet what a wild ride. Got an unusual one for this. In 7th grade, I goofed real bad and had to go to summer school. We were taking a test that would allow us to finish the course early and get full credit. The kid sitting next to me wasn't the brightest, and bribed me with an M80 to let him cheat off me. I took it. He still managed to fail. God knows where he got it. It was pre 9/11. Getting caught with it then wouldn't have been bad enough. My school's resource officer busted me skipping school and smoking weed with some friends. Made a big show about busting and citing me in front of them. Then crumpled up the citations and tossed the weed in a nearby bush for me to find after school. He and I were really close and he really empathized with my crappy home situation and didn't want to make things worse for me there. I really wish I could have a conversation with him now and show him how I've turned my life around. But I did some incredibly stupid things back then and I'm pretty sure he still hates me. Just find him and tell him. Tell him you're sorry, too. I work with kids and would consider this a highlight of my career. I was a 20-year-old guy in the Navy, stationed in Pensacola. I had a fake kid, so every weekend me and my buddies would leave base and get a hotel room and some booze and go party. One weekend we had hit the bars and were back in the room with about 10 guys and girls in our suite. One of the guys, name of gun, that was there was outside of our circle, so we didn't really know him very well, and he was totally hammered. At one point he left our room. Nobody thought much about it until he started banging on our door and then the fire alarm in the hotel went off. Mind you, it was about 3 AM at this point, so the faces of the people coming out of their rooms were not happy. They evacuated the entire hotel and called the cops. Turns out our dumbass buddy grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it into a maintenance closet. The foam from it set off the fire alarms. We were all terrified, mainly because we were drunk underage and most of us had eaten some earlier that night. The military will pretty much automatically P-test you if you're involved in an incident, so our budding careers were over. We held out hope that we could balls our way out of it, but all it took was the cops finding our suite covered in beer and liquor bottles and seeing our group of young drunks and they had us. Most of us were super polite, but the guy that caused the trouble was a dong to the cops. One of us rated him out because frick him, so that plus his attitude got him arrested. The cops called Shore Patrol and we awaited our fate. After what felt like forever sitting in the hallway outside our suite with the cops glaring at us, the meanest looking sumbitch I've ever seen showed up in dress whites. I'm talking perfect creases in the uniform, totally shaved head, and a look that made us want to crawl into a hole in the earth. I'll never forget his name, Petty Officer Hacker. What a perfect name for the guy that's gonna end our lives. After he got the cops' story, he had us stand at attention in the hallway while he absolutely chewed our asses. The cops left and he had us clean the suite and then get into the Shore Patrol vehicle. As we were loading up, he looked at us and said, "Alright you dumbasses, here's the story. I know that gun did the stupid crap and you all were just having fun. You being respectful to the cops saved your asses. So when we get back to base you have to go in front of the duty chief. None of you say a dang word and try not to breathe out of your mouths. The story is you all were sober as judges and guns showed up and caused all the trouble. We showed up, went in front of the duty chief, kept our mouths shut, and got sent back to our barracks with a warning about hanging out with troublemakers. Petty Officer Hacker is still my hero. My housemate ran some kind of torrenting thing for all our movies and TV shows. Seriously, I don't know. I don't actually download movies. Anyway, we had this home network drive, and he'd keep it topped up with whatever we all were watching or interested in. He'd even keep track of what our parents and grandparents were watching or wanted to see, so if I was planning to go visit them for a weekend it would be Candidates, you mentioned that your mum likes Downton Abbey, so the latest series is there and ready for you to copy onto your hard drive for her. Years ago I hung out with a friend and was wearing oversized shoes. My feet were killing me, so the girl I was with shoplifted a pair of cheap flat shoes. It was like, thank you, but you didn't have to do that at all. Drove through a local taco place and they messed up our order pretty bad. Drove back through and said, hey, this is all messed up. They handed us a new bag of tacos and then a bag of beers and said don't ever tell you name of taco place didn't treat you right. We were 16. My friend was pretty excited. I know a southerner when I read one. My best friend is a smoker and I met him when I was 17. The first time I got in his car and he lit a cigarette I was curious and eager to impress him and asked if he could spare one. And in return he asked if I smoked. As a kid desperate to seem cool, I lied. He went along with it and handed me a pack. From then on he brought me a pack every time he picked me up to go on a drive. Turning down the cash I offered because he knew how much it sucked to be an underage smoker and he didn't want me to worry about getting them from shady people. Fast forward a year and change later and even after I had turned 18 he still brought me a pack every time we went on a drive, saying by then it was a tradition. One day even further down the line while talking about old memories I mentioned how the first time we hung out I liked to try and seem cool. And he tells me he knew from the start but found the way I looked up to him endearing and he wanted to have something in common. Eventually continuing it as a staple of our friendship. I wouldn't recommend anybody start smoking but knowing he spent hundreds on me, keeping it up even after I could buy my own will always be something I think was sweet, even if ill-advised. Common knew how much it sucked to be an underage smoker and he didn't want me to worry about getting them from shady people. LOL. One time I parked in a paint store's parking lot and came back at 10:30 at night to the owner locking a chain across the driveway. I asked him to wait and I would move my car out. He told me I wasn't allowed to park there and the towing company would be there in 30 minutes to open the lock and impound the car. Then he got into his own car and sped away. I called up my dad and he showed up in 10 minutes with a set of bolt cutters and a new lock. Chopped the lock and replaced it with a new one so when the owner showed up in the morning he couldn't open his own parking lot. I would have moved my car the furthest I could away from the exit and waited hiding in the car. When the tow truck showed up, they would drop the chain and drive over to you. You then start the car and drive away. It's not like they can forcibly tow your car if you are driving it. My guitar technician completely rewired my guitar and installed new pickups. It took him 3 hours, but he still only charged me $30 because he liked the challenge. Oh, and he gave me a bag of the best weed I've ever had. He's a bad businessman but a great dude, and really that matters more. Was feeling down and broke and a friend gave me free weed and bought beer and pizza as well. We are still good friends to this day. Also same dude hooked me up with free weed again when I wanted to blaze with a girl I liked back in high school. A cashier let me buy Nyquil even though I was underage. I know what a rebel move. You lucky duck. I had a cashier refuse to sell overage me Nyquil. I even showed her my ID. My dad had to buy it for me. Manager at a job voided real transactions to fix my drawer that was off one night. Told me to never frickin' make me do this again. I never have. My dad knew a guy who pirated games and had heard of a new computer game that he was sure my sister and I would love. So he spent 2 hours during one of his precious Saturdays off waiting around for his mate to burn a copy of The Sims. Thus began my childhood and teenage obsession with killing Sims and building the perfect house. Thanks duh. I went to see Massive Attack at the Warfield, pre-StubHub days, with a group of friends. I was responsible for getting the tickets and distributing them to my group of friends. We had 2 extra tickets, so when we get to the theater I sell 2 of the tickets to these scalpers out front for face value because I'm no criminal enterprise. I walk back to my friends and they inform me that no, we actually only had 1 extra ticket and now 1 person does not have their tickets. So I go back to the scalper brothers and say I sold you 1 too many tickets. The first guy says no problem, how much will you give me for it, but second scalper guy says hey man, he sold you those tickets at face value, so you have to sell it back at face value, and he did. I guess I inadvertently stumbled across the scalper code of conduct. My mom told me I must be in bed by 9, but then we started watching Star Wars with my dad. Even though the movie ended at 10, my dad let me stay up since we were watching a movie. That one. Officer, arrest that man. I was a teen during the early 2000s when everyone wore too much eyeliner and thought they were so hardcore. Anyway, I didn't have any eyeliner. My mum wouldn't let me buy any and I had no money, so I didn't feel like I could join in. I mentioned this to my friend, Jamie, while we were all hanging out in town. He disappeared for a while. When he reappeared he gave me an eyeliner he just robbed for me, cause he was poor too. Thanks Jamie, I miss you. I was a young American visiting Paris in my early 20s a few years back. My apartment was one of the last stops on the metro line and I took the train home late one night after drinking. When I got to my station, I needed another ticket to get out of the station, but the station was closed so I couldn't buy one. I just sunk into a drunken heap against the wall and decided I'd have to sleep there until it opened again in the morning. This group of 3 shady looking young men walked by me and asked what I was doing. I stumbled through my broken French and told them I was trapped. Their leader shook his head and said le anglais, the English, the English. For some reason I corrected him and said, non, Jesus Americain. This was 2006 when Bush was president and Americans weren't super popular to men. One of the dudes in the group shouted something I couldn't understand, but he was upset and spit on the ground. I was pretty sure I'd be robbed. The first guy to speak to me calmed him down and motioned for me to follow him, and he used his ticket to get us through the gate together so I could get home, then wished me well on my way. People crap on Parisians, but I'll be damned if I don't have more stories of locals in Paris helping out a traveler than anywhere else I've been. Paris is like New York. As long as the locals think you're from somewhere else, they'll do you a solid. If they think you're a local, they'll just as soon shank you. I was driving through I-5S in California on my way from SF to LA. Somewhere along the way a dude on a black R6 hops on interstate and sneaks his crotch rocket over to the left lane and takes off. Normally I wouldn't have followed a bike as a speed buddy, but I was driving my brother's car, a modified feisty little MR2, and figured I might be able to keep up. That road's mostly a straight shot and depending on the day you can get long empty stretches of road. After he noticed me following him he punched it again till we were going about 140. His bike had no trouble opening up and it clearly wanted more speed, but I didn't want to push too much further. After screaming along for what seemed like an hour but was probably like a minute and a half, I backed off the throttle and watched him grow a little further, but then he slowed down too. We traded turns leading, not really breaking 110. We made great headway, fricking flying down the interstate together, but somewhere around Bakersfield we hit a pocket of congestion and slowed to about 90. Someone gave me a courthousey flash and I glanced back in time to see a cop rushing out from the right side into my lane. My heart sinks. I'd been caught red-handed, so I give the R6 bro 2 honks and flashed my lights. I could all but feel the lights and sirens about to be turned on as the officer rushes up from behind me. R6 bro glances back, points at my car, then to the next lane over to the right. Next, with his left hand he detached the license plate from the back of his motorcycle. With his right hand he gave me a little 2-finger salute. As we approached a small gap in the right lane I tapped my brakes and cut in as he gunned it. Copper flipped his lights almost immediately, but R6 bro was already so far ahead it was insane. I'm about 75% sure that I saw him coming back the other way with no cop following about 2 minutes after that. Thanks for saving my bacon, R6 bro. You were a great speed buddy. I frickin' owe you big time. TLDR. Badass biker bro baits blue bad by bolting. I wish I could give you a second upvote for the TLDR. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.